Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today I'll be discussing the Call of Cthulhu classic, The Crack'd and Crook'd Manse. Written by Mark Morrison and published by Chaosium, The Crack'd and Crook'd Manse was originally written as part of a tournament game for 1984's Fantasticon. It's currently available in the Mansions of Madness Adventure Collection. In the 33 years since its initial appearance, the adventure has gone through some changes to make it more appropriate as a regular adventure rather than just as a tournament scenario. However, there are some lingerings of its tournament roots. The scenario comes in short, a mere 18 pages, which also includes the maps and the art and the handouts, and it's easily playable in a single session. It's also perfect for new players that might not have had any experience with Call of Cthulhu, but still offers enough challenge for experienced players. The scenario follows the characters as they search for a missing millionaire archaeologist, a Mr. Arthur Corthwaite, and is set in Corthwaite's mansion, which has a dark and bloody history. Because of this setup, characters will most likely need to be detectives in order to play the adventure. But for my own adventure, it was a single detective and then two associates of Mr. Corthwaite's from Miskatonic University's archaeology department. Now, for any players in the audience, I'm about to lay out the details of this scenario, and it will be full of spoilers. So if you haven't played this adventure, I suggest you stop now, but tell your game master to check it out as a possible adventure to run. But if you keep watching, you'll ruin your experience for playing it. Now that the disclaimer is out of the way, let's dive in. The Crack'd and Crook'd Manse is a mood game, meaning that the GM's primary task is to keep the mood going as long as possible before the monster is revealed. Once that happens, all hell breaks loose. So I'll share my experiences and suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
And I'm Jack, the NPC. I'm going to give it to you from a player's perspective as the guy that got duped and eaten by a giant slug monster.
The setup is that the PCs are hired by a law firm to find their missing client. It begins with a letter and includes a newspaper clipping about Mr. Corthwaite. Once they meet with the lawyers, they learn several interesting facts. One of which is that shortly before his disappearance, Corthwaite ordered a dump truck of salt to be delivered to his house, but that order was never completed.
Probably had a slug problem. Big slugs.
The characters can do a bit of research and interviews with the various townspeople. For that, we get a good sampling of NPCs. One NPC that I would have enjoyed would be Seb Watkins, the neighbor whose horse is missing. My players took a very keen interest in Seb, and I suggest that keepers might want to prepare a bit about him just in case their players do too. We also get a couple handouts. One can be found at the newspaper office about the murder 30 years ago, and the other is discovered once they arrive at the house itself. However, there is no handout discussing the Fitzgerald murders 60 years before. They'll need to discover that through role-playing. Personally, I feel that there was a missed opportunity not having a note about either the Gamwell or Fitzgerald murders to be discovered in the library. Since the librarian is mentioned to be considering writing a book about the town, keepers should make her a resource for PCs to learn more about the history of the house. The history is that 60 years ago, a series of murders occurred there. Then, 30 years ago, Mr. Arthur Kerwin murdered his family. This is all an elaborate red herring to point the PCs in the direction that they may be a 30-year repeating curse on the house.
Yeah, I think we got everything we need to know about this place. We'll just look out for Ryan Reynolds with an axe and we'll be okay.
The truth is that there is no 30-year curse. It's all just coincidence. However, the house is now home to a giant slime monster that has grown up from a spore carried from Mr. Corthwaite's last expedition to South America. The creature is living inside the walls and in the plumbing is an incredibly lethal opponent. The keeper's task is to slowly reveal this horror as it moves through the cracked and damp walls, making them swell with its passing. The creature can attack at any time, but the longer the keeper can delay it, the more horrifying that revelation will be. It provides several ideas on how to draw out the horror, enhancing the mood and hinting at the creature's presence. One of the largest deals with the player staying in the house itself. Unfortunately, Once my players took their first step into that dank mansion, they said,
"Oh, hell no. We are not sleeping here. Let's go back to town to that boarding house or a Red Roof Inn or something, because I am not going to be sleeping in this place."
Once they did return, it was time to explore the house and the property. The module says that the grounds are 20 acres. However, there is no map given for it. I find that unfortunate. Keepers should prepare a rough map beforehand with several points of interest and a mazework of trails and pathways and different things for the PCs to explore. Also, know where the property meets others and the names of the neighbors, because investigators will likely want to speak with all of them. The house itself is mapped wonderfully. I also really appreciate that there is the separate player version and keeper version, the difference being the secret monk hole where Arthur Curwen's remains lie rotting, ready to give the characters a good fright. The keeper also receives maps for both the cellar and the attic levels. In one room, they discover a hidden note from the insane Arthur Curwen, scribbled 30 years before. Psychology rolls will reveal his paranoid ravings as madness. However, a copy of the note is not provided. Keepers, I suggest that you put something together. It doesn't have to be complete, since much of the note in the story is illegible, so it only needs to be just enough to give the players the idea of what it is they're looking at. While exploring the kitchen, the players might notice that the salt tin is missing and a line of salt along the base of the cellar door. Also, the salt shaker in the dining room is missing, leading one of my players to say,
"Yeah, I'm going to go back to my first theory on this. Guy got eaten by slugs."
I had my players make an occult roll. Those that succeeded remembered the folklore that salt repels ghosts, and that salting the bones of a ghost was an effective way to banish the spirit.
Or it could be ghosts, I suppose. I mean, given the history of this house and all, it makes sense. I was just kind of hoping for slugs myself.
While they're in the house, they will encounter some visitors. They can appear at any time you like, and is a good way to break the monotony, or if they're getting a little close, little interruption for them. One is Sheriff Whitford. The sheriff hates this house because of its history, and by association, he dislikes the PCs. Suspicious of them, he will sneak into the house, pistol drawn, in hopes of finding them up to no good. So when your players are enacting one of those harebrained schemes that only role players are capable of, that's a good moment to bring him in. If they're damaging the property or just being weird, they'll have to make some persuade or fast talk rolls to avoid getting kicked out of the house or even thrown in jail. The other caller is Joe Verrilli, a local newspaper reporter eager to get a story. Unfortunately for Joe, he searched the grounds before knocking at the door and discovered a rusty axe that he's now carrying. The sight of this axe-wielding stranger gives the investigators a bit of a fright. But once the introductions are made, Joe offers to stick around and help the player characters out. This NPC gives the GM a great opportunity to have the monster kill a character, maybe while he's off in another room reading a book, or maybe goes to the bathroom and gets sucked down the toilet. I'm a huge fan of the unfortunate, doomed NPC who serves as a good foreshadowing of the still unseen horrors. Unfortunately, when my players met him, they said,
"Yeah, look, stop talking. Okay, one, I've played enough Cyberpunk and Call of Cthulhu to know that either one, you're gonna betray me, try to kill me, and then I gotta kill you. Or two, you're a great guy, which means you're still gonna get killed by whatever is here. So do yourself a favor and run along. We don't need you. I don't want your death on my hands. Thank you."
Upstairs, the PCs can discover the self-cannibalized corpse of Arthur Curwen, and in the bathroom, they might discover the chemical formula for salt written on the mirror. In Kirthwaite's bedroom, they discover the biggest clues, specifically the empty salt shaker, the salt bins, the emptied shotgun shells, lines of salt across the windowsill and doors, and a partially written note that says the monster has but a single weakness, but it ends before stating what that weakness is. All of this was enough for my players to say,
"Okay, guys, this is salt. It is obviously salt. It's hammered home that it's salt. We got an empty salt shaker. We got makings for salt loads, okay? I was kidding earlier when I said slug monster, but no, This is seriously a freaking slug monster. So Marines, we are leaving. Get your bags, we're getting out, we're coming back with a dump truck full of salt, and we're gonna kill us a freaking slug monster.
Once the players have figured out the secret, that's the time to strike. Thankfully, they were all upstairs at the time, so the slime monster was able to come in and fill the first floor. The moment they saw it, that's when things got crazy. Unable to get down the stairs, the PCs have to go out a window. The monster will attack them as they go, sending out tentacles from the fireplace and the cracked walls. I use the 7th edition chase rules here, requiring dodge rolls as they went as they tried to pass through the rooms. Being that this can create 1x6 pseudopods around and able to control up to 10 at a time means there are more than enough attacks to go around. When they reached the window, the creature was squeezing out the first floor, meaning that they couldn't climb down the side of the building. They had to jump. It was a harrowing chase and a lot of fun. Unfortunately for the PCs, the last character to jump landed next to the wood cellar doors. Slimy pseudopods burst from the cellar and dragged the character screaming into the bowels of the house to be devoured.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun there. Good times.
After a few persuade rolls, the PCs were able to convince the lawyers to complete the order for a dump truck full of salt. With it, they returned to the house. As one of the characters shoveled salt down into the wood cellar, the other dropped down, salt getting thrown all over him, and he attacked the cellar door with an axe in order to open the way to the basement.
Come and get me, you murderous son of a bitch! We're going to hell together!
I decided that this was a good time for Sheriff Whitford to make another appearance. The sheriff, convinced that the player characters were crazy, attempted to arrest them because they refused to stop shoveling salt and axing at this door. That was about the time that the door finally gave way under the axe's blows, and everyone got a good solid look at the horror beneath the house, including the half-digested corpse of the fallen PC. That was about the time the sheriff decided it might be a good idea to help them out. They poured salt down into the basement, killing the beast, which also destroyed the house during its death throes as well as the sheriff's parked car. The lawyers tried to weasel out of paying the PCs for a job well done because the house was destroyed, but the sheriff, convinced that the PCs did the right thing, was able to help them out with that. Overall, I found the Crack'd and Crook'd Manse to be a wonderful adventure for both new and experienced players. Game Masters should make a few preparations, especially mapping the property grounds, and be ready for a lot of improvising in order to keep the scenario going as long as possible before the big reveal. The only real complaint that I have is sanity. There are several instances where a character risks losing sanity for mundane things that I don't really feel warranted, such as bumping into the tools in the woodshed, being surprised by the sheriff, being surprised by the reporter, and discovering a raccoon under the bed. These are most likely relics from the Adventures Tournament routes, and for a one-shot, it's perfectly fine to keep them in there. But if you're using this scenario as part of an ongoing campaign, I suggest removing them. Trust me, there are plenty of other encounters to damage a character's sanity scores even without these.
Well, me and my therapist appreciate that because I ain't got much sanity left to lose. However, I still got one complaint about this adventure, and that's dealing with the explanation. You see, characters can figure out that this monster has something to do with Corthwaite's South American expedition, but they never ever can get a full explanation. Keepers get a full explanation by reading the backstory, and there should at least be a possibility for the interest of storytelling that a player could learn that as well. My suggestion is to have a diary that Corthwaite kept during his expedition, and it recounts about the stone dome that they found, and the monster that emerged and hunted them through the jungle, and how people hurled themselves at it because they couldn't handle living in a world where such a creature exists. Put this diary up in the flattened trunk up in the attic.
say how it's crushed and the pages are stuck together with some sort of crusty ooze. And it might take days after the adventure before the characters can actually read the thing, which means it's not going to be helpful for them in the adventure, but afterwards they get to have the explanation, even at the cost of a little bit of sanity for reading it. Maybe they'll find it, maybe they won't, but you should always have the possibility that they could learn the information. Hey, what do I know? I'm just a lowly NPC that got eaten by a giant slug monster, so take it for what it's worth. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, please drop me a like. If you want to see more of my stuff, I'd always appreciate a subscription. But until then, have a great day.